Harry's Wife, Part 100.13, The Cut. Mandela, rejoice for me. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, and you join me for a continuing wade through what remains of the interview, or rather the self-promotion extravaganza that Harry's wife engaged in the recently publicised issue of The Cut. We pick it up as follows. Though it wasn't the planned first project, Harry's wife is happy for the podcast to be her reintroduction. It's so real, she says. I feel different. I feel clearer. It's like I'm not finding my voice. I've had my voice for a long time, but being able to use it. What utter nonsense is that? Doesn't even make sense. Word salad. At its heart, archetypes, slogan, don't believe the type, is Harry's wife's way of grappling with questions that have plagued her personally. Why certain women get saddled with labels, why they stick long after they've been proved untrue. Well, of course, what happens here is that those labels are ones which are a threat to her sense of control, and therefore, having a preoccupation with that, her narcissism needs to motivate her to try and nullify those threats. Reference is made to the first episode of Arsey Wipes, and then we pick it up. The rest of the episodes she'll dig into labels like old maid, dragon lady, bimbo, crazy, angry black woman, bitch. Well, B-word, she clarifies, and then squeals, "Oh, I don't want to say that word. It makes me so uncomfortable." Of course, that is just a representation of being coy, hardly the behaviour of someone that apparently lets you do anything, anywhere. Also, picking it up, and slut. Will Harry's wife say slut? Oh my gosh, that makes me so uncomfortable. Again, false humility and coyness. She has lined up a murderer's row of guests: Constance Wu, Issei Ray, Lisa Ling, Margaret Cho, and Zyvi. I'll let you guess who aligns with which archetype. You could also help me out by explaining who many of these people are. In her own life, Harry's wife's response to being typecast seems to be to lean into all the positive things her story symbolises. Notice not her life, but once again, her story. She understands what her ascent meant to black Britons. How the fuck could she? She's neither fully black nor British, for whom she's a sign of progress. I should imagine that most black Britons regard her as anything but a sign of progress. If you're a black Briton and you're listening, do furnish me with your views in the comments section. And to women, for whom she's a working mom, don't fucking kid yourself. You're not a working mom. You have a staff. You have somebody making waffles for you. You have somebody sticking your Pop-Tarts, not you, but sticking your Pop-Tarts in the fucking toaster. You have a cleaner. You have probably a pool boy you make eyes at. You have umpteen gardeners. You have people doing the shopping. You have nannies. Even in the recent publications, it's demonstrated in this interview, although I've not read it out so far, about the fact that Lilibet's with the nanny. So what do you actually do? What momming do you do? Occasionally you go there, and pat them on the head. And work? What? Getting ferried around in SUVs and getting on private jets? That's not work. That's just floozing about. So to suggest that she's a working mom and can be relatable to anybody else shows the level of delusion of her narcissism and, of course, the fact that she really does believe, that she can relate to people when she can't. There are some narcissists that can do that rather well through cognitive empathy, your glorious narrator included. I can't pretend to actually emotionally understand people, but intellectually I can, and I use it to my advantage, believe me. Anyway, she understands what her ascent meant to black Britons, for whom she's a sign of progress, and to women for whom she's a working mom, and a signal boost to the issues that affect them. Pay parental leave, wonder where that's fucking gone. Equal pay, what's going on with that then? Even though she avoids reading her own press, another lie, Harry's wife knows people see her this way. Well, if you don't read your press, how do you know that people see you that way? You mean you're deluded and you think that that's the way people see you? It's a combination of you do read your own press and very few people look at you this way, but that's what your narcissism tells you, that people look at you this way in the same way that you believe that all the little girls look at you and go, wow, there's a princess, and all the men want to slip you a crippler and knock your hip out. But it gets even better. She recalls a moment from the 2019 London premiere of the live-action version of The Lion King. You'll recall, of course, this was where there was some blatant merching going on, which I've analysed in parts passing, with the toe-curlingly, embarrassingly awful attempts by Prince Harry to shill on behalf of Harry's wife. I just had Archie. It was such a cruel chapter. Notice again the use of chapter, grandiosity. I was scared to go out. The lions aren't real, Harry's wife. The only lions that exist in London are those at London Zoo and the stone ones at the foot of Nelson's Column, you thick twat. A cast member from South Africa pulled her aside. He looked at me, and he's just like light, whatever the fuck that means. He said, I just need you to know, when you married into this family, we rejoiced in the streets the same we did when Mandela was freed from prison. Of course, she knows she's no Mandela, but perhaps even telling me this story is a mode of defence, because if you are a symbol for all that is good and charitable, how can anybody find you objectionable? How can anybody hate you? Well, you're only a symbol for all that is good and charitable in your own deluded mind. You're only a symbol for all that is good and charitable as a consequence of the way that your narcissism causes you to see yourself. But you're not actually. I mean, how can anybody hate you? Well, hate is a strong word. Most people dislike her. They dislike her because of her own behaviour. True, there are some who hate her because she just will not fuck off. But of course, this anecdote is clearly nonsensical. If, by the slightest margin, it did happen, keep your mouth shut. It doesn't endear you to anybody, but she lacks the self-awareness to do that. My own view, I believe that this is made up, that this didn't happen, that her narcissism causes her to believe that she's so important to the South Africans, who she's recently dumped on from a great height, of course, that she considers herself to be a peer of Nelson Mandela. She really does believe that. She believes that she's so important that people who'd fought against the oppression of apartheid and had their leading light freed from prison celebrated about him and her marrying into the royal family in the same way. What utter bollocks. That story has got so much bollocks. It's got more bollocks than Wembley Stadium filled with rugby players. It's utter bullshit. In all the history of porn and the bollocks that are on display there, there's more bollocks in that anecdote than all of the combined pink pods flapping around doing the old hide the sausage. It's utter nonsense. But of course, there's no bounds to her level of delusion, bringing up the past, revision of history, and grandiosity. The article rumbles on, talking about Archie being at preschool, and then we turn to good old Pa Markle. Harry's wife grew up very close to her father, Thomas, a retired lighting director, who gave Harry's wife her Hollywood bug, or rather, gave her a leg up in the industry, not that he's had any thanks for it. But she has been estranged from him basically since the wedding. He was not in attendance, and every miserable fissure in their former bond has been publicised, often by him. As we know from Tom Bower, that's not entirely true, but here's another opportunity to have a dig at her father, another opportunity to assert control over him, taking him off the shelf for a moment and devaluing him with these observations. Harry's wife sued for invasion of privacy and won, talking about the Mail on Sunday, though the defence mounted against her painted her as calculating and manipulative. When I ask about it, Harry's wife doesn't stay in her sadness for long. Instead, she uses it to discuss how toxic tabloid culture has torn two families apart. No, deflection and blame shifting, she has torn two families apart. Harry said to me, I lost my dad in this process. You lost your father, Harry, because of the woman that you're married to. Nothing to do with a toxic tabloid culture. But you can't see it because she uses the smokescreen of that to convince you that that is what has actually occurred. There's a car ride back to the house with Archie, not particularly interesting, asking about whether he ate his sandwich at lunch and what he changed into in the mid-morning shirt change. And then more. Earlier in our conversation about her goals for the life she's creating here, she'd remarked upon how, if Archie were in school in the UK, she'd never be able to do school pick-up and drop-off without it being a royal photo call with a press pen of 40 people snapping pictures. Well, that's because you were a member of the royal family, and people are much more interested in the royal family in the United Kingdom than they are in the United States. But again, your dim-wittedness doesn't seem to pick up on that. Sorry, I have a problem with that. That doesn't make me obsessed with privacy. That makes me a strong and good parent protecting my child, Harry's wife says. What you mean protecting your child by merching him as and when it suits you? Of no doubt leaving him most of the time with the nanny. Again, deluded mindset, that facade of believing that she's a good parent. We ended the visit in her sitting room, where there's a massive grand piano Tyler Perry gifted her as a housewarming present. Write the soundtrack for your life, he told them. Suitably pretentious, and I don't think that Harry's wife has got a musical bone in her body, but don't believe for a moment that will stop her from unleashing on an unwelcoming world 10 piano hits with Harry's wife. Expect a clumsy rendition of Chopsticks. It's interesting. I've never had to sign anything that restricts me from talking, she reveals as she ushers me towards the door. I can talk about my whole experience and make a choice not to. Why doesn't she talk? Still healing, she responds. Healing from what? You're not healing from anything. You're just healing from the self-imagined wounds that have occurred as a consequence of your belief that people have picked on you, driven by the paranoia and victim mentality that you have. I think forgiveness is really important. It takes a lot more energy to not forgive, she says wisely, but it takes a lot of effort to forgive. I've really made an active effort, especially knowing that I can say anything. Use of threat, hypocrisy. She says a voice full of meaning, and then she is silent. She breathes in and smiles, and breathes out and says, I have a lot to say until I don't. Do you like that? Sometimes, as they say, the silent part is still part of the song. A load of fucking bollocks. Again, word salad. And thus the conversation ends, and that's the end of the interview, more or less. There's another paragraph, but it's not really worth reading out, and there we are. This whole thing is demonstrative of the fact that Harry's wife has nothing at all to say, and one wonders if the interviewer has sought to capture that in this, demonstrating that she is this marshmallowy, vapid, vacuous, industrial beige character that talks in basically the contents of fortune cookies and has nothing meaningful at all to offer the world. It appears to me that quite possibly the interviewer, although appearing to be kissing ass, is also demonstrating that Harry's wife really is a transparent nobody with nothing of interest to offer. Certainly, this interview demonstrates that. Of course, Harry's wife won't see it that way. She will regard it as a triumph. The fact that her face adorned the rear cover and that there were various pictures of her contained throughout it. She, in her mind, will feel that it's another opportunity for her to speak her truth. And, of course, her narcissism has made excellent use of it. Bringing up the past, triangulating, asserting control indirectly and directly, use of the facade. Of course, asserting that control, drawing the fuel, drawing the character traits, and, as always, the residual benefits. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.